all the places that are welcoming Donald Trump to rallies this weekend and want him there to help prop up a candidate, there are many, many others who want him to stay away. He's talked about him a lot. He's talked about himself, and a new report suggests that could be a problem for his party. According to the New York Times, the president may prove to be a breaking point in Tuesday's contest for educated, wealthier white Republicans, especially women, the kind of people Joe's talking about. The Times says the group likes the GOP's pro-business policies, but rejects President Trump's divisive language on race and gender. The paper says that rather than trying to woo these voters back into the Republican Party, the president appears to have all but written them off. The Times points to his continued talk about the migrant caravan and birthright citizenship in the final days before the election, which this group of voters calls an alarmist tactic. The Times adds that in Republican-leaning districts that include diverse populations, quote, the party is in danger of losing its House majority next week because Mr. Trump's racially tinged nationalism has alienated these voters who once made up a dependable constituency. Donnie, I saw you nodding as you heard that characterization of those voters.
It's interesting. Donald Trump is not only disgusting and vile, he's stupid, because clearly what's going to happen, you can see it. It's very easy to look at this election and go, oh, is this a referendum on Donald Trump? Do I like him? Do I not like him? This is really, do I want Donald Trump unbridled, even more empowered? Or if I'm a Republican, maybe I still want him there because I like his tax, but do I want some padding around him? Do I want some guardrails around him? So I think the same way there were a lot of closet people who were Democrats who were not going to vote for Hillary and were going to vote for Trump but wouldn't admit it, I think there are so many of the Republicans that you described there, they're either going to stay home or even say, you know what, I want some guardrails against him. And this is against the backdrop, and it's interesting, there was a Marist poll yesterday that 80% of Americans are concerned that the current political tone will lead to violence. People are frightened. They just are. And they also see an irresponsible man treating the military like those little green soldiers we grew up with, like they're not human beings, from a podium in the Roosevelt Room, which is supposed to be used as for policy and not for campaigns. So there is a sniff test here. There is a smell test. And the final thing I will say is David Ogilvy, a great ad man, once said, the consumer is not a consumer. It's your wife, it's your next door neighbor, it's your best friend. A voter is not a voter. It's a human being, and human beings can smell this.
Well, you know, Gene used the word astounding to describe the performance yesterday in the White House, and it was astounding, but it was also quite predictable. Donald Trump is a salesman. All of his life, he has been selling himself. But now, as president, especially in the last several weeks, and especially yesterday, standing there in the White House, he was selling fear. Fear to the country. You had a sitting president of the United States using the podium to sow division in this country, which his performance yesterday, I would submit the Democrats ought to show it and replay it all this weekend and basically come down to Tuesday, a very important day, asking the question, what kind of a country do you want? With Trump acting like that and the country just waiting to make a decision, what kind of a country do you want?
And the country making that decision. But again, you have seen over the past week, America is starting to make a decision. And one poll after another poll, whether you're talking about in Nevada, which is leaning Democratic, in Arizona, most polls are going Democratic. Even in Texas, where conservatives were mocking Beto O'Rourke a week or two ago, saying that he was a made-for-TV candidate and a loser. Beto down only 3 points now. We're going to get to that poll in a little bit in Texas, and a poll that was released last night. This race is getting tight, and it's not breaking in the Democrats' way. And if you ask most Republicans on Capitol Hill why it is breaking the Democrats' way, they will tell you Donald Trump. He's put himself front and center. He's playing to his 23, 24, 25%. He's filling up arenas to make himself feel better. And now, guess what? He's starting to make excuses for why his party is going to lose. Last night, he publicly complained. I mean, can you believe this? He complained and whined that the anti-Semitic murder of 11 people inside a synagogue, that shooting, and the wounding of 6 police officers in Pittsburgh, and 14 pipe bombs that were mailed to American leaders who just happen to be people that he's called the enemy of the people. Last week, all those hurt Republicans' electoral chances, and he was whining about this last night. The president's remarks came in the final 5 minutes of his Columbia, Missouri campaign rally for GOP candidate Josh Hawley. Now then, you'll see here, Trump briefly appears to catch himself in the gravity of the words in the middle of saying it because he screwed it up this past week. But nevertheless, he doubled down. Take a look.
I will tell you, we have gotten tremendous numbers of Republicans are going out to vote. Now, we did have two maniacs stop a momentum that was incredible because for 7 days, nobody talked about the elections. It stopped a tremendous momentum. More importantly, we have to take care of our people, and we don't care about momentum when it comes to a disgrace like just happened to our country. But it did nevertheless stop a certain momentum, and now the momentum is picking up.
Gene Robinson, he's making excuse. Now, by the way, he's done that before where he didn't actually catch himself. But he's making excuses, and he's blaming the synagogue slaughter and his avid fans sending of pipe bombs to all of his political enemies as the reason why Republicans aren't doing as well now.
Yeah, he caught himself, but then he doubled down again. He said, "Well, of course we don't care about momentum in a time like this." And then he said, "But it did stop our momentum." I mean, that's appalling. I use a word we use a whole lot on the show, and we have a lot of reason to. But look, one reason he's so desperately trying to change the subject to immigration and to say outrageous things and do outrageous things that we'll all talk about and we'll all focus on is that he doesn't want the subject to be Pittsburgh. He doesn't want the subject to be this anti-Semitic gunman who was motivated by this complicated conspiracy theory that involves stopping the caravan. He doesn't want that to be what we're talking about, and this atmosphere that he's helped create in this country. He doesn't want the subject to be the pipe bomber or the gunman who shot two random African Americans in Louisville the day before the pipe bomber was arrested. He doesn't want the subject to be health care or indeed the tax cut that is desperately unpopular. So he wants to go back to terrain where he's comfortable.
Yeah, and Willie, we've talked about it also throughout the week. He doesn't want to talk about what Democrats across America are talking about, and that is health care. Rick Scott is having to endure a barrage of ads in the state of Florida about how, he's been trying to kill Obamacare, which of course brings pre-existing conditions along with it. He's gutted Medicaid funding, done all of, listen, when Democrats are talking about that issue, Republicans are losing.
Yeah, that's been one of the most brazen lies of this election cycle, is all the Republican candidates talking about wanting to protect pre-existing conditions while participating in lawsuits to get rid of Obamacare. But just back to the president's comment for 1 second, Joe. It's not like he's a bystander, not like a guy who read about this stuff in the news. A couple of days ago, he stood at the site of that massacre in Pittsburgh. He was at the Tree of Life Synagogue, and to not be so moved by that you're able even to process through your brain and then say out loud that it got in the way of your momentum is just an astounding lack of personal humanity and empathy that I guess we shouldn't be shocked anymore, but you can still be appalled by it.
Well, we shouldn't be shocked about it, Willie, but you saw what he did when he got back from Pittsburgh. He kept score in Pittsburgh. What public officials stood by him, what public officials did not stand by him. And his tweets coming back from that Pittsburgh memorial was all him whining. Yeah. Him whining about bad press coverage, him whining about public officials not showing up, him whining about how he wasn't treated well, him whining about one thing or another, while you have all of these families having to bury their dead relatives who have been gunned down by white nationalists who, was, I'm sure, along the way inspired by somebody's hate speech.
11 dead while worshiping in a synagogue, and he's worried about how he was treated while he was there.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.